Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished unloading the last crate from his cargo ship. The metal container hit the loading dock with a loud clang that echoed through the busy port area of Nexus Station. Around him, dozens of alien species moved back and forth, carrying goods, arguing over prices, and conducting business in 100 different languages. The station was huge. It stretched for miles in every direction, a massive metal structure that spun slowly in space around a small planet. Ships came and went constantly, bringing traders, travelers, and workers from across the galaxy. Jake had been coming here for 3 years now, ever since he started working as a cargo pilot for Earth Trading Company. He signed the delivery papers on his datapad and handed them to the dock supervisor, a tall blue alien with 4 arms and no visible mouth. The creature made a series of clicking sounds that Jake's translator device turned into "Payment confirmed." "Thank you for your business." Jake nodded and headed toward the main commercial area. He had 6 hours before his next cargo pickup, enough time to grab some food and maybe buy a few souvenirs for his sister back on Earth. The commercial district was always busy, filled with shops, restaurants, and market stalls selling everything from exotic fruits to advanced technology. As he walked through the crowded streets, Jake noticed how most aliens barely looked at him. Humans were still fairly new to the galactic community. Most species saw them as weak and unimportant. Jake was used to it by now. He was just happy that Earth had finally been allowed to join the Galactic Trade Network, even if they were treated like junior members. The upper levels of the commercial district were clean and well-maintained, with security guards patrolling regularly. But as Jake made his way toward a small restaurant that served decent Earth-style food, he had to pass through the lower section. This area was darker and dirtier, with fewer security cameras and almost no patrol officers. It was here that Jake heard the commotion. 3 large creatures had surrounded a smaller alien near a pile of cargo containers. Jake recognized them immediately as Krillians. They were reptilian, about 7 feet tall, with thick scales, sharp claws, and powerful muscles. Their homeworld was known for producing mercenaries and criminals. These 3 looked like trouble. The alien they had cornered was much smaller and older. Jake had seen his species before. They were called Vorthak. They looked like birds that had learned to walk upright, with feathers instead of hair and large, intelligent eyes. This particular Vorthak was clearly elderly, with gray feathers and a slight tremor in his hands. "Give us your credits, old bird," growled the largest Krillian, his forked tongue flicking out as he spoke. "And that bag you're carrying, we know what's in it." The elderly Vorthak clutched a small cloth bag to his chest. "Please," he said in a weak voice, "these medicines are for my granddaughter. She is very sick. Without them, she will die." The second Krillian laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Not our problem, Featherbrain. Credits in bag, now." Jake stopped walking. He watched as other aliens hurried past the scene, their heads turned away. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them stopped to help. A few even crossed to the other side of the corridor to avoid getting too close. This was how it worked in the lower districts. The strong took from the weak, and everyone else minded their own business. Station security rarely came down here, and when they did, it was usually too late to help anyone. The third Krillian, who had been quiet until now, stepped closer to the old Vorthak. "Maybe we should take more than just his money," he said with an evil grin. "Teach him a lesson about walking through our territory." The elderly alien's large eyes widened with fear. His whole body began to shake. "Please," he whispered. "I am just trying to help my granddaughter." Jake felt his hands clench into fists. He had seen bullies before, back on Earth and on other stations. But this was different. This wasn't just someone being mean. This was 3 armed thugs threatening to hurt an old man who was just trying to save his family. He looked around again, hoping to see a security guard or someone in authority who could help. The corridor was full of aliens, but they were all ignoring what was happening. Some were even walking faster to get away from the scene. Jake knew he should probably do the same thing. Humans were not known for being fighters. Most alien species could easily overpower a human in a physical confrontation. The Krillians were especially dangerous. Their claws could slice through metal, and their scales were tough enough to stop most small weapons. But as he watched the elderly Vorthak tremble in fear, Jake remembered his grandfather's words. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about being strong enough to win. It's about being brave enough to try. His grandfather had been a police officer back on Earth for 30 years. He had always taught Jake that good people had a responsibility to help those who couldn't help themselves, even when it was dangerous. The largest Krillian grabbed the bag from the old alien's hands. The Vorthak cried out in distress as several small bottles fell out and shattered on the metal floor. The precious medicine spread across the ground in colorful puddles. No, the elderly alien gasped, falling to his knees. That was the last of it. There is no more. The Krillians laughed as they began going through the old alien's pockets, taking his credit chips and personal items. Other aliens continued to walk past, pretending they didn't see what was happening. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Hey," he called out in a loud, clear voice. "Leave him alone." The 3 Krillians stopped what they were doing and turned to look at him. The largest one, who seemed to be the leader, tilted his scaled head to one side and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Look what we have here," the leader said, showing his sharp teeth. "A little human thinks he can tell us what to do." The other 2 Krillians spread out slightly, blocking any easy escape route. Jake could feel his heart beating faster, but he didn't back down. "I said leave him alone," Jake repeated, his voice steady despite his fear. "Take his money if you want, but don't hurt him." The Krillian leader's eyes narrowed. "Walk away, soft skin. This is none of your business." Jake looked down at the elderly Vorthak, who was still on his knees staring at the spilled medicine with tears in his large eyes. Then he looked back at the 3 thugs. "I'm making it my business," he said. The largest Krillian stared at Jake for a long moment as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed off the metal walls. "Did you hear that?" he called to his companions. "The little human wants to play hero." The other 2 Krillians chuckled and moved closer. Jake could see their claws extending slightly from their fingertips, a sign of aggression that he had learned about during his pilot training. His mouth felt dry, but he stood his ground. "What's your name, human?" the leader asked, still grinning with his sharp teeth. "Jake Martinez," Jake replied. He figured there was no point in lying now. "Well, Jake Martinez," the Krillian said. "I am Vex Scar. These are my brothers, Kral and Thex, and you are about to make a very big mistake." Vex stepped closer, towering over Jake by at least 2 feet. "Do you know what we do to humans who interfere with our business?" Jake swallowed hard. "I can guess, but I'm not walking away." More aliens had stopped to watch now, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Jake could hear them whispering in various languages, though his translator was having trouble keeping up with all the different voices. The elderly Vorthak struggled to his feet. "Please, young human," he said in his weak voice, "do not risk yourself for me. I am old. You have your whole life ahead of you." Jake glanced at the old alien, then back at Vex. "What's your granddaughter's name?" he asked. The Vorthak looked surprised by the question. "Her name is Pip," he said softly. "She is only 6 cycles old." Jake nodded and turned back to Vex. "Her name is Pip. She's 6 years old and she's dying. This old man was trying to save her life, and you 3 decided to steal her medicine for a few credits." Vex's expression darkened. "Enough talk, human. Last chance to walk away." "No," Jake said firmly. "You want me to move?" "Make me." The crowd of watching aliens murmured louder. Jake heard someone say that the human had lost his mind. Another voice wondered if all humans were this stupid. Vex's claws extended fully now, gleaming under the station's artificial lights. "You think because you're from Earth we won't hurt you? Your species means nothing to us." Jake felt sweat running down his back, but he kept his voice steady. "Maybe not. But I know something about Krillian culture." This seemed to catch Vex off guard. What would a human know about our ways? Jake had spent many hours during long cargo flights reading about different alien cultures. It was part of being a good trader, understanding who you were dealing with. "I know that your people value honor above everything else. I know that you follow the old codes even when you're acting like criminals." Kral and Thex looked at each other uncertainly. Vex's eyes narrowed to thin slits. "I know about the right of challenge," Jake continued. "Any being can invoke it when they witness injustice. Single combat to settle the matter." The crowd went completely silent. Even the background noise of the station seemed to fade away. The right of challenge was an ancient Krillian tradition, older than their spacefaring civilization. Jake wasn't even sure if it still applied in modern times, but he was betting that Vex wouldn't want to look weak in front of an audience. Vex stared at him for what felt like an eternity. You would challenge me to single combat? You a soft little human? That's exactly what I'm doing, Jake said. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Jake, no! The elderly Vorthak protested. He will kill you. More aliens had gathered now, drawn by the commotion and the mention of the ancient challenge. Jake could see dozens of different species in the crowd. Some he recognized, others he had never seen before. Word was spreading quickly through the lower district. Vex looked around at the watching faces, then back at Jake. You invoke the right of challenge? I do, Jake said. For what cause? To defend this elder from your theft and threats of violence. Vex was trapped now, and Jake could see that he knew it. If he refused the challenge in front of all these witnesses, word would spread that he was a coward who wouldn't face a human in fair combat. His reputation would be ruined, and reputation was everything to a Krillian. But if he accepted, he would be bound by the ancient rules. No weapons except natural ones. No help from his brothers. Fight until one opponent yielded or was unable to continue. You understand? Vex said slowly. That I could tear you apart with my bare claws? I understand that you could try, Jake replied. The crowd pressed closer. Someone was recording the event on a personal device. Jake realized that this was probably going to be broadcast across the station, and maybe beyond. A human challenging a Krillian warrior to single combat was not something that happened every day. Vex looked at his two companions, who both nodded. They understood the situation as well as he did. Very well, Vex announced in a loud voice that carried across the growing crowd. I, Vex Scar of the Bloodscale clan, accept your challenge, Jake Martinez of Earth. A cheer went up from some of the aliens in the crowd. Others looked worried or excited. Jake noticed several beings pulling out communication devices, probably contacting friends to tell them what was happening. The combat will take place in the central plaza. Vex continued, following the traditional format. In 1 hour to allow for proper witnesses to gather. Jake nodded. 1 hour. That gave him a little time to prepare, though he wasn't sure what kind of preparation would help him against a 7-foot reptilian warrior. The elderly Vorthak grabbed Jake's arm with a trembling hand. You do not have to do this, he whispered urgently. Please, just run. Get away from here. Jake looked down at the old alien's worried face, then at the puddles of spilled medicine on the floor. What's your name, sir? I am called Elder Zeph, the Vorthak replied. Elder Zeph, I'm not running away. That little girl Pip deserves a chance to live, and you deserve to be treated with respect. Jake gently patted the old alien's shoulder. Don't worry. I have a plan. It wasn't entirely true. Jake had the beginning of an idea, but calling it a plan was being generous. Still, he had committed himself now. In 1 hour, he would be fighting for his life against one of the galaxy's most dangerous species. As the crowd began to disperse, many heading toward the central plaza to claim good viewing spots, Jake tried to remember everything he had ever learned about Krillian physiology and fighting techniques. He was going to need every advantage he could find. The central plaza of Nexus Station had never seen a crowd like this. Word of the challenge had spread through the communication networks faster than Jake had expected. Aliens from all levels of the station had come to watch the impossible spectacle of a human challenging a Krillian warrior to single combat. Jake stood at the edge of the makeshift arena, trying to control his breathing. Someone had marked off a large circle on the plaza floor using emergency tape. Station security had arrived, but instead of stopping the fight, they had simply formed a barrier to keep the crowd back. Apparently, the right of challenge was still recognized under galactic law even here. Elder Zeph stood beside him, wringing his hands nervously. There is still time to withdraw, the old Vorthak whispered. No one would think less of you. Jake shook his head. Yes, they would. And more importantly, I would think less of me. Across the arena, Vex Scar was warming up, stretching his powerful muscles and extending his claws. He looked even more intimidating in the bright lights of the plaza. His scales gleamed like armor and his movements were fluid and controlled. This was clearly not his first fight. Jake looked around at the crowd. He estimated there were at least 2,000 aliens watching, representing dozens of species. Many were holding recording devices or placing bets on the outcome. The odds were heavily in Vex's favor. Jake had overheard someone offering 50-1 against the human. A station official, a gray-skinned alien with multiple eyes, stepped into the center of the circle. By the ancient rite of challenge, these two beings will engage in single combat, she announced. The rules are simple. No artificial weapons, no outside assistance. Combat continues until one fighter yields or is unable to continue. Are both parties ready? Vex nodded, his teeth glinting in the light. Jake swallowed hard and nodded as well. Begin, the official shouted, quickly stepping out of the circle. Vex didn't rush forward immediately. Instead, he began circling Jake slowly, like a predator studying its prey. His claws scraped against the metal floor with each step, making an unnerving scratching sound. Jake turned to keep facing his opponent, remembering advice from his grandfather about never taking your eyes off a dangerous enemy. He tried to recall everything he had read about Krillian fighting techniques during his hasty preparation time. Krillians were powerful and fast, but they relied heavily on their natural weapons, claws and teeth, and their superior strength. They were used to winning fights quickly through overwhelming force. What they weren't used to was prolonged combat against an opponent who refused to stay down. "You're smaller than I expected," Vex called out, still circling. "Are all humans so tiny and weak?" Jake didn't respond. He was studying Vex's movements, looking for patterns or weaknesses. The Krillian's legs were digitigrade like a bird's, which gave him speed but might make him less stable if his balance was disrupted. Vex suddenly lunged forward with surprising speed, his right claw aimed at Jake's chest. Jake threw himself to the side, rolling across the hard floor and coming up near the edge of the circle. The crowd gasped as Vex's claws passed through the space where Jake had been standing. "Fast for a human," Vex admitted, turning to face him again, but not fast enough. The second attack came immediately. This time Vex feinted left, then struck right, his claws raking across Jake's upper arm. Jake felt the sharp pain and warm wetness of blood, but managed to grab a piece of debris from the floor. A broken piece of metal pipe that someone had dropped. Vex laughed. "A stick? That's your weapon?" Jake didn't answer. He was already moving, swinging the pipe at Vex's knee joint. The Krillian easily jumped back, but Jake kept pressing forward, forcing his opponent to give ground. The crowd was getting louder now, shouting in dozens of languages. Some were cheering for the underdog human, while others were calling for Vex to finish the fight quickly. Vex's next attack was more serious. He came in low, trying to grab Jake and lift him off the ground where his claws could do more damage. Jake dropped flat to the floor and rolled between Vex's legs, then scrambled up behind him. For a moment, Jake had a clear shot at Vex's back, but he hesitated. Attacking from behind felt wrong, even in a fight for his life. That hesitation cost him. Vex spun around faster than Jake thought possible and backhanded him across the face. Jake flew backward, his makeshift weapon spinning away across the floor. He landed hard against the arena boundary, his head ringing from the impact. "Get up, human," Vex growled, advancing slowly. "I'm not finished with you yet." Jake tasted blood in his mouth and felt his left eye starting to swell. His ribs ached where he had hit the ground. For a moment he considered staying down. It would be easier, safer. Then he heard Elder Zeph's voice from the crowd. "Please, Jake." "Get up, for Pip!" Jake pushed himself to his hands and knees, then struggled to his feet. The crowd was quiet now, watching to see what would happen next. "Impressive," Vex said, genuinely surprised. Most beings would stay down after a hit like that. Jake wiped blood from his mouth. "I'm not most beings." This time Jake attacked first, rushing forward and throwing a punch at Vex's midsection. His fist connected, but it felt like hitting a stone wall. Vex's scales were tougher than they looked. Vex grabbed Jake's arm and threw him across the circle. Jake rolled when he hit the ground, coming up near where his pipe had landed. He snatched it up and immediately swung it at Vex's approaching form. The pipe connected with Vex's shoulder, making a loud ringing sound. Vex roared in pain and anger, the first real damage Jake had managed to inflict. "Now you've made me angry, human," Vex snarled. What followed was the longest 3 minutes of Jake's life. Vex attacked with renewed fury, his claws leaving cuts on Jake's arms, legs, and torso. Jake dodged what he could and blocked what he couldn't dodge, using the pipe to deflect the worst attacks. But Jake had advantages that Vex hadn't expected. Every time the Krillian knocked him down, Jake got back up. When Vex expected him to be tired, Jake kept fighting. Human endurance was legendary among Earth species, but most aliens had never seen it in action. More importantly, Jake was learning. Each exchange taught him more about Vex's fighting style. The Krillian telegraphed his attack slightly, dropping his left shoulder before striking with his right claw. His balance was vulnerable immediately after a missed lunge. Jake began to change his strategy. Instead of trying to inflict damage, he focused on wearing Vex down. He made the Krillian chase him around the circle, forced him to make repeated attacks that hit nothing but air, and generally turned the fight into a contest of endurance rather than raw power. The crowd was on its feet now, many of them cheering for Jake. They had never seen anything like this, a weak human refusing to quit against a superior opponent. Vex was breathing hard now, his attacks becoming sloppier. Sweat was running down his scaled face despite the cool station air. "Why won't you just stay down?" he panted after another failed attack. Jake circled away from him, looking for his opportunity. "Because someone taught me that doing the right thing isn't about being strong enough to win. It's about being brave enough to try." Vex lunged again, putting all his remaining strength into one final attack. But this time Jake was ready. He stepped aside at the last second and brought his pipe down hard on Vex's extended wrist. There was a loud crack. Vex screamed and stumbled forward, his momentum carrying him into the arena wall. His head struck the metal barrier with a dull thud, and he collapsed to the ground unconscious. The plaza erupted in cheers. Jake stood over his fallen opponent, breathing hard and bleeding from a dozen cuts, but victorious. The station official stepped back into the circle. "Winner, Jake Martinez of Earth." Elder Zeph pushed through the crowd and threw his thin arms around Jake. "You did it," he cried. "You actually did it." Jake looked around at the cheering crowd, hardly able to believe what had just happened.
He had won.
Against all odds, the weak human had defeated the mighty Krillian warrior. As medical personnel arrived to tend to both fighters, Jake realized that something important had changed. The way the aliens in the crowd were looking at him was different now. There was respect in their eyes where there had been dismissal before. Word of this fight would spread throughout the galaxy, and with it would spread a new understanding of what humans were capable of when they refused to give up. 3 hours after the fight, Jake sat in the station's medical center with his arm in a sling and 17 stitches holding various cuts together. The doctor, a friendly insectoid alien with 4 arms, had assured him that he would heal completely within a few weeks. "You are very lucky," the doctor had said while working on Jake's injuries. "Krillian claws carry bacteria that can cause serious infections in most species, but human immune systems seem to handle it quite well." Jake had thanked the doctor and was now waiting to be discharged when Elder Zeph appeared in the doorway of his treatment room. The old Vorthak looked much better than he had earlier. Someone had given him clean clothes and helped him wash the dirt from his feathers. "Jake, my friend," Elder Zeph said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got in a fight with a 7-foot lizard and somehow won," Jake replied with a weak smile. "How about you? Did you manage to get more medicine for Pip?" Elder Zeph's large eyes brightened. "Yes. The story of our fight has spread throughout the station. When the other merchants heard what happened, 3 different shops donated replacement medicines. I have more than enough now." He sat down in the chair next to Jake's bed. "But that is not why I came. I wanted to thank you properly. What you did today was beyond brave. It was heroic." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone should have done." "No," Elder Zeph said firmly. "Hundreds of beings walked past us today. Only one stopped to help. Only one was willing to risk his life for a stranger." He paused, his voice becoming emotional. "You saved my granddaughter's life. I can never repay such a debt." Before Jake could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside. Voices were speaking in excited tones, and Jake could hear his name being mentioned repeatedly. A moment later, a tall blue alien in an official station uniform appeared in the doorway. Jake recognized her as Governor Nell, the station administrator. She was followed by several other important-looking aliens and a small group of reporters carrying recording equipment. "Mr. Martinez," Governor Nell said in accented but clear English, "I hope you don't mind the interruption. I wanted to speak with you personally about today's events." Jake tried to sit up straighter in his bed. "Of course, Governor. Though I'm not sure what there is to discuss." Governor Nell stepped closer, her expression serious. "What you did today has caused quite a stir throughout the station and beyond. The footage of your fight with Vex Scar has been broadcast across 17 different news networks. Everyone wants to know about the human who invoked the right of challenge to defend an elderly alien. One of the reporters, A slug-like creature with multiple eye stalks raised a recording device. "Mr. Martinez, what made you decide to intervene? Weren't you afraid of the Krillians?" Jake looked around at all the faces watching him expectantly. "Of course I was afraid. I'm not stupid, but fear isn't a good reason to let bad things happen to good people. But humans are known to be physically weaker than most spacefaring species," another reporter said. "How did you manage to defeat a trained Krillian warrior?" Jake thought about that for a moment. "I guess I just didn't know when to quit. My grandfather always told me that sometimes the person who wins isn't the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it's just the person who refuses to give up." Governor Nell nodded approvingly. "That attitude is exactly why I'm here, Mr. Martinez. I have a proposition for you." She gestured to one of her assistants, who handed her a data pad. "Nexus Station has a problem with crime in the lower districts. Our security forces are effective against organized threats, but they struggle with the kind of street-level violence you witnessed today." Jake wasn't sure where this was going. "Okay. Most of our security personnel rely on physical intimidation and superior firepower," Governor Nell continued. "But your approach today was different. You used knowledge, psychology, and determination rather than brute force." Elder Zeph leaned forward in his chair, listening intently. "I would like to offer you a position as a security consultant," Governor Nell announced. "Your job would be to help us develop new strategies for maintaining order in the commercial districts. Strategies that don't rely solely on who has the biggest weapons or the strongest muscles." Jake stared at her in surprise. "You want me to be a security consultant? But I'm just a cargo pilot." "You're a human who stood up to 3 armed thugs to protect a stranger," Governor Nell replied. "And you won. That suggests to me that your species might have valuable insights about conflict resolution that we haven't considered." One of the reporters spoke up again. "Governor, are you saying that humans might be naturally suited for peacekeeping roles?" Governor Nell considered the question carefully. "I'm saying that today's events have shown us that there are different kinds of strength. Physical power isn't the only way to solve problems." She turned back to Jake. "The position comes with quarters on the station, full medical benefits, and a salary that's considerably better than what you're making as a cargo pilot. More importantly, you'd be helping to make the station safer for beings like Elder Zeph." Jake looked at the old Vorthak, who was nodding encouragingly. Then he looked around at all the aliens watching him expectantly. 6 months ago, most of them would have barely acknowledged his existence. Now they were offering him a job and treating him like some kind of hero. "Can I think about it?" Jake asked. "Of course," Governor Nell said. "But don't take too long. Word of today's fight is spreading beyond the station. I have reports that it's being discussed on Krillian homeworlds and in the Galactic Trade Council chambers. Everyone wants to know more about human methods of conflict resolution." After the officials and reporters left, Jake found himself alone with Elder Zeph again. The old Vorthak was quiet for a long time, simply sitting and thinking. "You should accept their offer," Elder Zeph finally said. "Why do you think so?" Elder Zeph's feathers ruffled slightly, a sign of deep emotion in his species. "Because today you showed everyone that strength comes in many forms. Physical power, technological superiority, political influence. These are the kinds of strength that most species understand, but you demonstrated something different." He stood up and walked to the small window that looked out over the station. "You showed moral courage. The strength to do what is right even when it is dangerous. Most beings talk about honor and justice, but when the moment comes to act, they find excuses." Jake considered this. "You really think I can make a difference?" "I know you can," Elder Zeph replied without hesitation. "Because you already have. 3 hours ago, I was just another victim of crime in the lower districts. Now I am an alien with a story to tell about human courage. My granddaughter will grow up hearing about the day a human risked his life to save medicine for a stranger's child." Elder Zeph turned back to face Jake. "Stories like that spread, my friend. They change how people think about your species. Today you fought 1 Krillian, but the real victory is that thousands of aliens across the galaxy are learning that humans can be trusted to do the right thing." Jake looked out the window at the bustling station. Somewhere out there, other weak beings were probably being threatened by stronger ones. Other bullies were taking advantage of those who couldn't fight back. Maybe Elder Zeph was right. Maybe 1 human really could make a difference. "Okay," Jake said quietly. "I'll take the job." Elder Zeph smiled, the first genuine smile Jake had seen from him all day. "Good, and Jake?" "Yes, thank you. Not just for today, but for what comes next. I have a feeling that your real adventure is just beginning. 6 months later, Jake stood in his small office overlooking the central plaza where he had fought Vexgar. The area looked completely different now. Where there had once been emergency tape marking off a fighting arena, there was now a peaceful garden with benches where beings of all species could rest and socialize. The changes weren't just cosmetic. Crime in the lower commercial districts had dropped by 60% since Jake had started his new job. More importantly, the nature of security work on the station had evolved in ways that nobody had expected. Jake's assistant, a young Centaurian named Alex Cooper, knocked on his office door. "Sir, the morning reports are ready." Jake looked up from the datapad he had been reading. Alex was one of 3 humans who had been transferred to Nexus Station in the past 4 months, as word of Jake's success had reached Earth's colonial administration. The other 2, Lisa Bennett and Ryan Foster, were working in different sections of the station, applying human approaches to problems that had puzzled alien administrators for years. "Any major incidents last night?" Jake asked, accepting the report pad. 2 minor disputes in the market area, both resolved through mediation. 1 case of public intoxication that required escort to medical facilities. And 3 requests from other stations for consultation on implementing our new protocols. Jake smiled. The protocols they had developed were revolutionary in their simplicity. Instead of responding to every disturbance with overwhelming force, security teams now used what Jake called the human approach, talking to people, understanding the root causes of conflicts, and finding solutions that didn't require anyone to get hurt. It had taken time to train the alien security staff. Many of them had initially been skeptical that conversation could be more effective than intimidation. But the results spoke for themselves. "Oh, and sir," Alex added, "Elder Zeph is here to see you. He says it's important." Jake's face lit up. "Send him in." Elder Zeph entered the office looking healthier and happier than Jake had ever seen him. His gray feathers had a lustrous sheen, and he moved with more energy than before. Most importantly, he was not alone. Behind him came a small Vorthak child with bright yellow feathers and large, curious eyes. She couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall, and she stayed close to Elder Zeph's side while looking around the office with obvious interest. "Jake, my friend," Elder Zeph said warmly, "I would like you to meet my granddaughter, Pip." The little girl stepped forward and performed what Jake had learned was a formal Vorthak greeting, bowing her head while extending her small hands, palms up. "Thank you for saving my life," she said in a clear, sweet voice. "Grandfather has told me the story many times." Jake knelt down to her level. "Hello, Pip. I'm very glad to meet you. How are you feeling?" "Much better," she said brightly. "The medicine worked perfectly. The doctors say I'm completely healthy now." Elder Zeph beamed with pride. "She insisted on coming to thank you personally. We are leaving today to visit her parents on our home world, but she refused to go without meeting the famous human hero." Jake felt his cheeks redden. "I'm not a hero, Pip. I just did what anyone should do." The little girl tilted her head to one side, studying him with the serious expression that only children can manage. "Grandfather says you fought a big scary Krillian even though you were smaller and weaker. That sounds like hero stuff to me." Before Jake could respond, Alex knocked on the door again. "Sir, excuse me, but you have an urgent communication from Earth Colonial Command." Jake frowned. Communications from Earth were rare and usually meant something important was happening. "Can it wait a few minutes?" "I'm afraid not, sir. They say it's about the Galactic Council meeting." Elder Zeph's eyes widened. "The Galactic Council? What do they want with you?" Jake honestly didn't know. "Alex, can you set up the communication in the main conference room?" "Elder Zeph, Pip, would you like to come with me? This might be interesting." They walked together to the conference room where a large holographic display was already showing the Earth Colonial Command logo. When Jake activated the system, the face of Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared, looking serious but pleased. "Jake Martinez," the Admiral said, "I hope you're sitting down, because I have some remarkable news." Jake took a seat at the conference table with Elder Zeph and Pip beside him. "I'm listening, Admiral." 3 days ago, the Galactic Trade Council formally voted to upgrade Earth's status from associate member to full member. More significantly, 7 different species have requested human advisors for their security and diplomatic services. Jake stared at the holographic display in shock. "Because of what happened here? Because of what you started here?" Admiral Hayes corrected. Your methods have been studied and copied on dozens of worlds. Crime rates are dropping everywhere humans have been assigned to security roles. More importantly, diplomatic relations are improving. She leaned forward on her end of the transmission. Jake, the galaxy is starting to understand that humans bring something unique to interspecies relations. We're not the strongest species or the smartest or the most technologically advanced, but we seem to have a gift for finding peaceful solutions to problems that other species would solve with violence. Pip tugged on Jake's sleeve. What does this mean? She whispered. Jake looked down at her, then back at the Admiral. It means that more humans are going to be able to help people like you and your grandfather. Admiral Hayes nodded. That's exactly what it means. Jake, I'm authorized to offer you a promotion to Director of Human Cultural Exchange. You would oversee human advisors throughout this sector of the galaxy. Elder Zeph gasped. Jake, that's wonderful. Jake felt overwhelmed. 6 months ago, he had been a simple cargo pilot. Now he was being offered a position that would affect relations between Earth and dozens of alien worlds. There's something else. Admiral Hayes continued. The Krillian High Council has requested a formal meeting with human representatives. They want to apologize for Vex Scar's actions and discuss incorporating human conflict resolution techniques into their own culture. This was almost too much to believe. The Krillians want to apologize? Apparently, your fight with Vex has become something of a legend among their people. They see it as proof that true strength comes from honor and determination, not just physical power. Vex himself has requested permission to serve as a liaison between human and Krillian security forces. Jake looked around the room at the faces watching him. Alex was grinning with excitement. Elder Zeph was nodding approvingly. Little Pip was looking back and forth between the adults trying to understand what was happening. Admiral, Jake said slowly, 6 months ago, I was nobody special. I'm still nobody special. I just tried to help when someone needed it. And that, Admiral Hayes replied, is exactly why you're the right person for this job. The galaxy doesn't need more conquerors or politicians or weapons experts. It needs people who will step in when others won't. People who care more about doing what's right than about being safe. Jake thought about his grandfather's words. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about being strong enough to win. It's about being brave enough to try. I'll take the job, he said. After the communication ended, the three of them sat in silence for a few moments. Finally, Pip spoke up. Jake, can I ask you something? Of course. When I grow up, can I be a human too? Elder Zeph chuckled softly. You can't change species, little one. But you can learn to act like humans do. You can be brave and kind and help others when they need it. Pip considered this seriously. Then that's what I want to do. Jake knelt down beside her chair. Pip, you already are brave and kind. And I have a feeling that when you grow up, you're going to help a lot of people. As Elder Zeph and Pip prepared to leave for their home world, Jake walked with them to the transportation hub. The corridors they passed through were bustling with activity, but it was different from the chaos Jake remembered from his early days on the station. Beings of different species walked together, talked together, and helped each other in ways that would have been rare just 6 months ago. Look around you, Elder Zeph said as they walked. This is your legacy, Jake. Not the fight, not the job offer, not even saving Pip's life. This. He gestured at the peaceful, cooperative scene around them. You showed everyone that there was a better way to solve problems, a way that doesn't require anyone to be a victim. At the departure gate, Pip hugged Jake goodbye. Promise me something, she said. What's that? Promise me that you'll keep helping people even when it's scary. Jake smiled and hugged her back. I promise, Pip. And you promise me that you'll remember that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing the right thing even when you are afraid. I promise, she said solemnly. As their transport disappeared into the vast darkness of space, Jake stood at the observation window and reflected on everything that had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a nobody cargo pilot who happened to witness a crime. Today, he was a galactic diplomatic advisor whose actions had started a movement that was spreading across multiple worlds. But the most important thing hadn't changed at all. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were still bullies threatening people who couldn't fight back. There were still beings like Elder Zeph who needed someone to step in and help.